Hello, everyone. Just getting things set up here. Okay, that sound should be a bit better. Okay. So I just wanted to test something out, whether the whiteboard will still be shown on Facebook. Um, That's getting interesting. Oh, I do not see whatever it's, so I think I'll just do it without the whiteboard. Sorry about that. And I'll figure that out. Why it's not quite visible on Facebook. Anyway, so I'm just going to wait a few minutes. Just check if anyone still wants to join live. If you are joining live, say hi. Let me know how your day's going today. Hopefully it's a nice chilled Sunday. And yeah, just any thoughts you have about the topic of, or the idea of managing your mind, managing your thoughts and emotions and behaviors, and yeah, what it kind of brings up when you think about that concept, and whether you've tried something like that before and how that went. I'm very curious to know. And if you are watching the replay and you want to say anything about this, just hashtag replay and put your comments in the comment section. And like I usually say, you can ask questions in the comments and I will reply to those. Even if it's on the replay, I will go back and answer any questions that you have, or just any thoughts that you have, any reflections, things that you tried out after watching this and how it went, or something you got stuck on. Feel free to type that in the comments. And when you're joining live as well, you're welcome to interact. It's not a like lecture or something. It's interactive, it's informal. We're just kind of discussing different topics. Okay. So I'm Sarah, your health and recovery coach. I love working with female clinicians. I think we are such a special group of people, and we tend to have similar things that we struggle with, and reasons that we end up not prioritizing our own health and recovery. And I think it's really important, not only for our patients as well, like if we are showing up as clinicians who are fulfilled and calm and feeling energized and we engaged at work, that is a very different experience for our patients and very different outcomes for our actual care, but also just as clinicians ourselves, like for our actual experience of our work, our experience of our lives, how we actually experience every single day. I think that's really incredibly important. And all the stuff about health is in that direction. So it's not just to be healthy because you should, or because it's the right thing to do or because some terrible thing's going to happen. It's like being healthy and truly honoring what you need in terms of health and recovery can really make such a huge difference in how you feel on like a day-to-day basis, whether you feel nourished and energized and engaged, or whether you're feeling burnt out, stressed, or overwhelmed. Like that difference is just huge in our experience of our lives. So that's why I love to talk about these topics and why I love coaching women in healthcare and helping them prioritize their own health and recovery. So I'm going to go ahead and get started today. And today we are talking about managing your mind. So essentially looking at how your thoughts affect your emotions and behaviors. So I could just as well call it emotional, or like managing your emotions or managing your behaviors. But we're just going to work mostly on how our mind influences these other pieces, and just touching on like when this is helpful and when it might not be so helpful or appropriate, and when it's not so appropriate, and when you can use it and what it's actually for. So I really love this topic because I find that once you start seeing these things, you will notice that in so many different aspects, you will start to have such a better understanding of your own emotional responses, your own behaviors, but also that of your patients or of peers or other providers or family members, whatever it is. So what we are not doing when we are managing our mind is, firstly, we are not bulldozing through our emotions. So in other words, I'm not saying, let's say you are highly anxious about something. I'm not just saying like, oh, but you're just choosing to be anxious. So just choose not to be anxious, think something else, you know, and then you'll be fine. It's not trying to avoid negative emotions. So as a way of like bypassing and not having to ever experience discomfort. And it's also not this thing to use as like a way to beat yourself up. What we are trying to do when we see from a little bit of a distance, a little bit of objectivity on how our thoughts are relating to our emotions, are relating to our behaviors, we can just have a little bit more of a sense of what's going on. And just think of it as like gathering information, like, oh, this is really interesting. I'm learning this about myself, or I'm learning this about other people, or whatever it is. It's not a way to beat yourself up or to, as I said, like bypass emotions or anything like that. So it's just like a little bit more objective look. It's like when we are caught up in that emotion and that belief system and those things that we're just kind of swimming in. It's like the water we're swimming in. We have no idea that we're even in water. And when we look at that from a little bit of a distance, we're like, oh, that's so interesting that that's how I think, or that that's how the way that I think affects what I do. So if you've ever had the experience of like, let's say you go to an event with a friend of yours and she says something at the end of the event, like, did you hear when so-and-so said this? And like the way that she interpreted that was completely different to what you were thinking. Like you maybe didn't even notice that. It didn't even like stick for you in your mind because you didn't have this like emotional story that went with it. And that's kind of what's happening on a daily basis with everything. Like we are making meaning around situations. So if you think of a situation, let's say something happens, right? It's just the situation, it's just the facts. So let's say if multiple different people were looking at that situation, they would all agree on what the facts are, right? And then we make stories about that, or we make meaning from that. So you can think of it as the situation itself is emotionally neutral. In other words, there are no direct emotional responses that are directly related to the situation itself. The emotional response you get is related to the thoughts or whatever meaning you make or assumption you make about the situation itself. And I'll go into, like I said, when this does not apply. But that is the basic kind of framework of this. So we are using what's called like a linear CBT model. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. This is obviously not a cognitive behavioral therapy session. I'm not a therapist. And this model is very, they call it linear because it's not looking at like how everything interplays with each other, but it's looking at like a portion of something and just trying to simplify that to use as a tool. So it's not complete, it's not encompassing the entirety of how we are wired, how we work physiologically, everything that happens psychologically. It's not encompassing all of that. It's taking a little slice of that and it's making a tool from it that can help you with certain situations in your life. So one of the areas that it's not particularly applicable is when we have a nervous system like stress response. So almost think of it as like your body felt that first, and then your brain tried to explain what happened. In other words, you didn't, with your thoughts, create that emotional reaction or that response, but it actually happened the other way around. And sometimes that can happen, especially with more kind of ingrained stress responses, response to trauma. They call it like big T and little t trauma. So sometimes it's like a big traumatic event, but sometimes also like little traumas, like little things that where something was too much or not enough, where you essentially learned like a stress response to that, and that will happen automatically, and it's not necessarily based on whatever you were thinking. So it's not always applicable, but it's a tool. So it's supposed to be helpful in certain situations. So having said that, we'll go into the actual tool itself. I just wanted to like touch on that, like why it's important as well for us, because I think essentially everything that we're experiencing on a daily basis is this, right? So we are experiencing emotionally how we are viewing the world, the assumptions that we make, the thoughts that we have. And so you can start to, before we kind of go into this, just start to get a sense of like, what do I actually want to be feeling in practice? And we can kind of reverse engineer that later, but just kind of have that question kind of in your mind of like, how do I actually want to be feeling in practice on a day-to-day basis? And not necessarily, and we don't want to be having the same emotion all the time. Like the goal is not to always be calm and never to be emotional and never to have any like reaction to things and just be like this calm, you know, person who doesn't ever get like agitated, or that's not necessarily the goal. The goal is to have an emotional experience that to you feels fulfilling and energizing and meaningful. So just want to see if I want to, one of the like obvious examples I want to use. Okay, so sorry, I'm just like kind of jumping back and forth. Let me say this first. So the actual model itself, there are different like acronyms that people use. Sometimes people use the acronym CTFAR. My coach, Dr. Sasha Hines, she uses STEAR because it's just easier to remember. STEAR, STEAR. So you can think of like steering your life in the direction that you want it to go. Another one is STBR or STB. STEB, STEB, or STEBR. So it doesn't really matter, but these are kind of just ones that you can try out, and whichever one kind of sticks in your brain a little bit better, because it's something that you can use on a daily basis. I generally use it as like a as needed basis, like when I notice that I'm having a strong emotional reaction to something, or yeah, I feel kind of like triggered by something that a patient says, I will usually do this, or that someone else says, I will use this tool. But you can also use it as just like a general everyday kind of maintenance of health tool. And you can kind of do a little like brainstorm first, or what people call like a brain dump, like just start having thoughts just flowing. And then anything that you notice that is either coming up a lot or has a very strong like emotional story for you, you can use this tool. So STEBR, we'll use that one. So the S is for the situation. So you can write this down. I was trying to do that on the whiteboard thing, but I think I'll just do it in the comments. So STR, and that's situation, thought, emotion, behavior, or you can say action, which is this STEAR, and then the R is the result, which is like an optional one at the end. Sometimes it's helpful to see like what is the bigger result that is created through this. And then the CTFAR is just the circumstance, and then the same. So I'll just use that one as well. CTFAR is circumstance, thought, feeling, action, results. Cool. So you can kind of do that as like an S on one line, the T in the next line, the E in the next line, B, etc. So one of the examples that I wanted to use that are just quite like simple and from like everyday life, and one that we can kind of easily relate to is like, let's say the situation is that you are trying something for the first time. So let's say, let's just pick rowing, for example. Let's say you're trying rowing for the very first time in your life. If someone has the thought about that situation of like, I suck, yeah, I'm so terrible at this, I'm never going to get this right, everybody's watching me, people are judging me, whatever it is, you can imagine what emotional state would come from those thoughts. You're going to feel insecure, you're going to feel anxious, etc. And probably the like action or behavior is probably not even really never actually going for this first time trying this thing, or just like when you try, you're trying to, you're so anxious about like getting every try right. You are like not willing to, let's say you fall in the water, you're not willing to like get out and try again. You're just like, okay, no, I'm done. And the bigger result that you then create is that you'd never actually really learn to row. And then you can see how the thoughts that you have about that very neutral situation leads to your emotional state and your actions and eventually your results as well. So let's think of a similar situation. Someone is rowing for the first time and they have the thought of, this is my first time doing this and I'm going to get better. Or they have a thought of like, this is so cool that I get to learn something completely new. Or they have the thought that, yeah, I'm definitely going to suck in the beginning, but later I'll get better. Whatever it is, you can see how those thoughts will have a very different emotional response. You're probably then curious, you're probably open, you probably have like a desire to learn. And then the actions that you create from that is trying again, learning, getting feedback. And the result is that you learn to row, or get probably very good at rowing if you carry that on. So you can see how different the thought itself or the situation or the circumstance itself is emotionally neutral. So it doesn't, in and of itself, that going to row for the first time does not have any emotional story attached to it. It's us that then have a specific thought or a specific story or a specific assumption about that situation that then results in the emotional experience of it, the actions, and the results, or the behavior and the results. So that's just like a very obvious one. And I think what a lot of people then go to is like, okay, but I can't like just use this affirmation and then like think I'm amazing, right? And that's what I wanted to make clear with this example is the thought that the second person is having is like what I like to call like realistic affirmations, right? So they're not saying, oh, I'm amazing at rowing. Like they know they're not, they're doing it for the first time, right? So they're not going like, oh, I'm amazing at this, I'm the best at this. They are just saying, yeah, I'm new to this, so I'm going to suck for a while and then I'm going to improve and I'll get better. So it's like this is what's sometimes called like moving through neutral. So you're not necessarily trying to take your thought and have a completely different thought about it, like the opposite end of the spectrum, like going from like, I suck at this to I'm incredible at this. You're going through a neutral space where you're just trying to be a little bit more objective about this and just say like, what assumptions am I making? Like, am I assuming that I need to be good at something the very first time? Am I assuming that people are going to judge me for something when I'm trying for the first time and I suck at it? Am I assuming that if I'm not good at something, that means something fundamentally about me, like I'm flawed in some way? So all of these things, you can kind of go through a neutral or more like objective look at the same situation. And this is why people in the exact same situation can have such different reactions and such different approaches. And I also want to make that clear that it's emotionally neutral. I'm not saying it's morally neutral. For example, if someone makes a racist comment and you are like, oh, well, I guess that's actually fine, just depending on who you are and what you think. That's not what I'm saying. It's not that it's morally neutral, it's emotionally neutral. For example, if someone makes a racist comment and the person that they're making the comment to is also like totally agrees with them, they're going to have a very different emotional experience to someone who is obviously that doesn't agree with them. So it's emotionally neutral, not necessarily morally neutral. And that's just what I want to make sure that that's very clear. Because these are some of the objections that sometimes come up when you think about this kind of like mind work. So I wanted to use an example from that is more kind of applicable to us as clinicians. And I used this in the previous, I think it was on emotional health. So feel free to go and look at that one. But I thought it was just like a common thing that all clinicians can relate to. And I used the example of a patient missing their appointment. And I was just making the point that if I am, let's say a new clinician, I'm trying to make rent and I'm stressing already about how many patients I have this month and someone misses their appointment, I'm going to have a very different emotional reaction to someone in another practice who's crazy busy, is just trying to like have a break, to have a coffee, and the patient misses their appointment. They're going to be like relieved, whereas the other person is going to be stressed, anxious, frustrated, etc. And so that's more like a slightly different set of situations and slightly different set of circumstances, I guess, that would lead someone to have different thoughts about it and different emotions, etc. But let's get more specific without changing certain things about the situation. Let's say you're in your practice and a patient misses their appointment. And let's say your thought about that is they are so inconsiderate, or you can say like patients are always inconsiderate, they always do this, they don't care about their own health, or they don't respect me, they don't respect my time, those kinds of thoughts. You can see how those thoughts would lead to a feeling of like frustration or resentment, being angry. In the same kind of example as previously, if the thoughts are more in the direction of, oh my gosh, I need to make rent this month and now I'm going to miss out on this money and my practice is going to fail and all this kind of stuff, you can see how those kind of thoughts would more likely create something like anxiety. So the thoughts that we're having are then creating the emotional experience. So let's say in the example of you thinking that they're inconsiderate, they don't care about their health or me, they don't respect me, then you are likely to get like frustrated and angry. Let's say you either like send some like passive aggressive email, or you don't say anything and you're just seething inside and you're like angry, and the next time you see them you're like emotionally a little bit like withdrawn and thinking about this previous encounter. And let's say the entire result of that is that you have either like a certain kind of communication with that patient or a certain kind of experience with them in the future. Maybe whatever your reaction was caused them to stop coming to your practice, whatever the result was that came from that. So one of the ways that we can use this tool is to think about how would I actually want to be feeling when a patient misses their appointment. So let's say you want to feel calm or let's say calm. Then you can think of like what kind of thoughts about this exact same situation would produce the feeling of calm. So for example, something like, oh, that's really a pity for them because now they're going to have to pay that missed fee appointment. Yeah, that really sucks for them. Or yeah, this happens sometimes as part of being in practice. Or I will reach out to them and find out what happened, whatever it is. So that's one of the tools that or the ways that you can use this, almost to like reverse engineer. This is how I want to be feeling and what thoughts might help me like get to that. And realize that that's not going to now suddenly be your new normal response, right? This is something that you practice. It's something that you use as a tool to slowly get better at these things. But it's just to have a slightly different angle on it. The other thing is, let's say, for example, a patient misses their appointment, and my assumption is they are so inconsiderate, right? Let's look at the thought line, the different thoughts that you're having, and just look at it for like, try and imagine that you're like a little, like you're a detective and you're trying to like find information. You're trying to like, kind of like I said earlier, you're being curious, you're trying to get information, and you're looking at that thought of they so inconsiderate, and you can think, well, do I really know that that's what happened? Is it true that every time someone misses an appointment that they are inconsiderate? Is it true that there are sometimes other reasons for people missing their appointments? Or even something like, yes, it's true that some people are inconsiderate and that's why they miss their appointment, but it doesn't mean that everybody is inconsiderate. Another assumption that's kind of baked into that is they should be considering my time. That's what should be on like the forefront of their mind, is my time. Even if like their life is chaos, something came up, they had an emergency, whatever, they should have been thinking about my time, right? So there can be so many assumptions and beliefs like baked into the thoughts that we have. And something that can often be a helpful thing is just to be curious, right? So if someone is missed their appointment, your thought could be like, I wonder if they're okay. Let me check that nothing serious happened. Let me follow up with them, whatever it is. But that comes from a very different place than being inconsiderate. The other way that you can use the tool, kind of like this example, is you can use like, what is the result or the behavior that I'm trying to get? And then how can I reverse engineer that? So you can almost start, even though they're in that linear line of situation, thought, emotion, action, result, you can still jump in at any part of that map and then kind of work your way up and down from there. So you can sometimes, if there's a thought that keeps repeating, you can put that in the thought line and see like what is likely to come from this thought, what emotions, what actions, etc. And how can I maybe start playing with some other neutral thoughts or something that's just a little less with like cognitive biases. So you can kind of reverse engineer stuff. You can just look at it as kind of a perspective. It doesn't have to be something that you use to change something. It can just be something that you use to notice what's happening. There's something else I wanted to say about that. Oh, so when I'm saying like look at the C line, the thoughts, you are essentially looking for anything that is very absolute. So like different cognitive biases or what is it called? Cognitive bias or distortion. So you're looking for things like where you're just making a rule about everything, like all people are like this, or you're making a judgment based on very little information and you're basing it on like what previously happened. So it's like a story from the past that you're now like projecting onto the present thing. Or it can be, I'm trying to think what else it could be, like a cognitive bias. Yes, things that are like very absolute, that there's no room for like nuance, or, you know, sometimes like this, sometimes that. It's like these very, it's always like this, very all or nothing kind of statements. These you can start kind of looking at in the thought line, and also just any assumptions that you might have. What are the assumptions that you're making about that emotionally neutral situation? What are the assumptions? What are your beliefs behind that? What are your stories about that? And then you can start kind of looking at what else could be true. That's a nice kind of like prompt when you're looking at this, like what else might be true? You're not trying to, as I said, like convince yourself of some like alternate reality that makes no sense to you, because one of the reasons that those kind of affirmations where you're going like to the extreme other end, one of the reasons that they don't work, like let's say you truly believe that you suck at something and now you're trying to say, no, I'm amazing at this. One of the reasons that it doesn't work is that it doesn't produce the emotional response that it would if you truly believed that thought. So it has to be something that we actually truly believe to be true. And that's why these neutral things really work. It's just a more kind of, it's like almost just describing the facts. It's like, this sometimes happens, or I don't know what happened, or, you know, those kind of things. It's very like neutral. Trying to think if there's another example that I might want to go through. I talked about a common trigger for me a while ago of like when a patient interrupts me, and usually they will have asked me a question and I'm in the process of answering the question and they will interrupt me. And so I have thoughts like, you know, they don't respect me, they're inconsiderate, they don't want to listen to what I have to say, etc. I get frustrated, I get so annoyed. And then I just go like, oh, well, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm just not going to say anything. You know, so I get this like passive aggressive stance. I don't actually complete what I was saying, so they don't get the information that they were actually asking me for. And then I'm obviously like fuming internally, and so I'm distracted by this like emotional reaction, and it colors the way that I interact with them the next time. Whereas if I just thought like, wow, like this person's listening skills are not particularly good, or if I just thought, oh, that's interesting that that person wasn't able to like hold their attention when I was talking. Maybe if I tried this way of communicating, maybe that'll be more effective for them, or maybe I can use a different medium to answer their question, or maybe I can send them an email later, or whatever it is. But you have a different different thoughts around that are based in like curiosity and openness, and not this immediate like making it mean something about yourself or making it mean something about the other person. So often it's like judgments about ourselves or others, or just rules or outdated stories or assumptions that we have. And these are very much on autopilot. These are things that we have practiced. I think there's a saying like, a belief is just a practiced thought. So you've practiced that for years, maybe decades. So don't expect this to suddenly be able to, for you to suddenly be able to like think a new thought or do a new behavior, whatever it is. It's just to slowly start grooving new neural pathways, and to have that little bit of a distance between the stimulus or the circumstance and your response to it, where you're just getting a little bit curious about it. You'll start to kind of notice yourself. The more you practice this, the more you'll start seeing like someone will do something and you'll say like, oh, that's so interesting. I wonder like what their like thoughts and assumptions and beliefs were that led them to act in that way. Like you just get interested in it, you get curious about it, instead of like
making it this, yeah, like I said, like this thing that means something about that person or about you or whatever it is. So let me know if you've tried this tool. Like I said, you can jump in at any place if there's a thought that keeps coming up, or if there's a emotion that keeps kind of coming up on repeat, or there's like a situation in your work life or home life that you're not kind of happy with that result or that behavior, and you want to kind of reverse engineer that and just see like where might that be coming from, and what else might be true, how else could I start thinking about this. So try that out, let me know how it goes. If there's anything that's unclear or that you just want to ask about it, feel free to DM me, reach out to me, or just post it in the group. And if something I've said today resonates with you and you want to get more kind of practical help on it, like I see where you're coming from, but I don't know how to like actually apply that in my specific situation, sign up for a mini coaching session with me. These are always available for you guys. They are in the group description, but I will link again after this session. But you can literally just book that session. It takes you to a calendar and you can book the time that suits you. And those are half-hour sessions, and we just dive into that specific situation that's going on for you. And we take a look at like what is actually going on, what might be the assumptions and the thoughts that are leading to this result that you're having in work or in your life. And we just start to kind of examine things from different perspectives, get a new viewpoint on that, get a bit of clarity on like what might be actually going on. And often these things are like situations where you feel like, sometimes I call them like friction points, but just anything that's like, this thing is so frustrating. I've heard the description ones of feeling like you have one foot on the gas or accelerator and one foot on the brake. So you feel like on the one hand, you really want to make this change and you really want to feel this particular way, or you want to stop doing this. But on the other side of that, you just have these like what some people refer to as like self-sabotaging behaviors, or just something that feels like it's always going against that thing that you really want, or that thing that you want to change, or that situation that you want to be different. So it's these kind of like friction points or frustrations or things that seem to be on repeat and you're not quite sure what to do with that. That's what these sessions are for. So feel free to book one of those, and you're always welcome to reach out to me for any questions, or if there's something that you're not sure about, whether your situation is one that you can bring to the coaching session, whatever it is, I'm always available, so you can reach out when you need something. Hope you guys have a great Sunday evening, and I'll see you in the group.